Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new session of Respiration in Plants. So, in this session, we are going to study about an introduction to the respiration. Then, how do plants breathe? Actually, we are talking about in this session how the plants respire, right? So, we will also discuss about the glycolysis process. So, let us start the session with the introduction to the respiration in plants. So, all of us breathe to live, but why is breathing so essential to life? Okay, so everyone breathe, whether it is a plants or an animals, everyone breathe in and breathe out. But why is breathing so essential to life? What happens when we breathe? And also, do all living organisms, including plants and microbes, breathe? If so, how? So these are some of the general questions that comes in our mind when we study the topic respiration, right? So the first question that why is breathing so essential to life, right? So all the organism require energy, right? Energy to do their all metabolic activities, their daily activities, vital functions. So they require energy, and that energy is in the form of ATP in the body. So, breathing is essential in life because in the process of respiration, after breathing, there is an exchange of gases. Now, these gases, when get enter inside the cells or inside the tissue of the organism, then this oxygen are used to break down the food. It means that oxidation of food, right? And when there is an oxidation of food, complete oxidation of food, then a lots of energy is given out in the form of ATP. And that energy is used for the various activities. And what happens when we breathe? Okay, when we breathe, or when we breathe means here when there is an exchange of gases in the plants. So through the stomata, the gases exchange occur, right? And when there is a gaseous exchange, then that gas get dissolved in the cells. And also, do all living organism, including the plants and microbes, breathe? So there are many types of organism, and the respiration occur in two types, okay, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. So in the anaerobic respiration, what happened? The organism require oxygen for the complete oxidation of food, whereas in anaerobic respiration there is no requirement of oxygen, right? Now, all living organisms need energy for carrying out daily life activities, be it absorption, transport, movement, reproduction, or even the process of breathing. Okay, so every organism, whether it is a plant or an animal or a microbes, they require energy to carry out their daily life activities. Okay, so they require energy to complete their daily life activities, whether it is an absorption process. So in the after the process of digestion, there is a absorption of the nutrients in the small intestine. So whether it is a absorption process, transport process, transportation of substances from one place to another. In the case of water, there is no use of energy, there is no requirement of energy, but yes, there is a requirement of energy for the transportation of the food material, right? So the transport also require energy. Movement, so when you do your body movements, in that there is an expense of energy. Reproduction processes also require a lot amount of energy, and even in the breathing process there is a contraction and relaxation of the muscles in the case of animals, right? So there also they require the energy, right? So where does all this energy comes from? Okay, the question is that where this energy is coming from? We have already discussed that for the energy there must be the complete oxidation of food. Complete oxidation of food means the food get burns, the glucose get burns, and when it is broken down into the simpler forms, okay, and it is a many steps reaction, it is not just a single step reaction that the glucose is broken down into the simpler forms, okay? No, it is a many step reactions, and in that reaction, slowly and slowly, gradually, the the molecules are broken down, and many, like you can say, the energy energy is formed, that is the ATP. Okay, and so this energy is coming from the oxidation of food. So when we eat food for energy, but how is this energy taken from food? Okay. So when you eat food, the food get digested. It is broken down into the simpler form so that it could be absorbed easily. After the absorption, the food get dissolved in the blood, assimilation, and it is reaches to the every parts of the body, every parts of the tissues and cells of the body, right? So in this way, the nutrients which has been absorbed are now reached to their cells, body cells, and there, with the help of blood, the oxygen is also transported. This I'm talking about in the case of animals, right? Because here it has been asked, we know we eat food for energy. So we means here, humans eat energy, food for energy. Okay, we eat food to get the energy. So how the energy we are getting, we are discussing that. So we are getting energy from food. As food get digested, it get absorbed, it get assimilated and reaches to the every parts of the body. Okay, and also with the help of blood, the oxygen is also reached to the every parts of the body. Now the nutrient which has been absorbed and reached to the cells after the assimilation process, it get broken down in the presence of oxygen, and it releases the energy. Now we will see how this is occurring in the case of plants. All the energy required for life process is obtained by the oxidation of some macromolecules that we call food. Okay, so different life processes is occurring in our body, whether it is a respiration, excretion, okay, circulation, and reproduction. Every life process, okay, is required energy. So that energy is coming from where? It is coming from the oxidation of macromolecules, and that we call as food. So only green plants and cyanobacteria can prepare their own food. Okay, so there are the two types of plants, the plants that are green in color, that they contain the chlorophyll, and also the monerans, some of the monerans like cyanobacteria, blue green algae. Okay, and can prepare their own food. They can prepare their own food because they contain the pigment chlorophyll, and that helps in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, that is the making of their own food. By the process of photosynthesis, they trap light energy and convert it into the chemical energy that is stored in the bonds of carbohydrates like glucose, sucrose, and starch. Right? So, green plants, what they do, green plants trap the light energy. They trap the light energy and convert the light energy into the chemical energy by using the raw material. Here, the raw material is carbon dioxide and water. So that is used in the presence of light and chlorophyll, and the chemical energy is synthesized. And that chemical energy can be glucose, right? Here, the carbohydrates, and that can be stored in the form of sucrose and starch. So the food material here is get synthesized in the form of bonds of carbohydrates. So bonds of carbohydrates, right? So glucose, sucrose, and the storing, that is the carbohydrate, that is the starch. Now we must remember that in green plants too, not all cells, tissue, and organ photosynthesize. Only the cells that contain chloroplast, that are the most often located into the superficial layers, carry out the photosynthesis. Right? It means that every cells of the plants are not capable of performing the process of photosynthesis. Okay? Only those cells of the plants can do the process of photosynthesis that is having chloroplast in them. Okay, the cells that are having chloroplast that can only used for the process of photosynthesis, and they are mostly located in the superficial layers, and they can carry out the process of photosynthesis. The other cells that do not contain chloroplast, okay, chloroplast, and inside the chloroplast we find the green pigment that is called as chlorophyll. Okay, so this is not having any chloroplast in them. Those plant cells that are not having any chloroplast, okay, they cannot go for the process of photosynthesis. Okay, so hence, even in the green plants, all other organs, tissue, and cells that are non-green need food for oxidation. So they also need food for the oxidation. For example, the roots cells. The cells of the roots, they do not contain chloroplast, right? They do not contain chloroplast, but still they require food material, right? So that is why it is mentioned here. Even in the green plants, all other organs, tissue, and non-green parts of the plants need food for the oxidation. They also require food, though they do not synthesize the food. Hence, food has to be translocated to all non-green parts. Okay. So that is why the food that has been synthesized by the green parts of the plant should be transported to those parts that are non-green. Okay. They do not contain chloroplast in them. Animals are heterotrophic. Animals are heterotrophic means they cannot synthesize their own food. They cannot make their own food. Okay. So they obtain food from plants directly. They are taking food from the plants directly. And that is why they are called as herbivore, or sometimes indirectly. Indirectly means the animals, some of the animals are eating another animals, like herbivore. They are eating the herbivore. Carnivores animals are eating the herbivores. And herbivores animals are getting energy or taking food from the green plants. So indirectly they are dependent upon the carnivores are dependent upon the plants, because if the herbivores are not getting plants, then there will be no herbivore and these carnivores will not get food. Okay, so indirectly they are again dependent upon the plants only. Saprophytes like fungi are dependent on the dead and decaying matter. We all know that fungi grows on the dead and decaying matter. Whatever the substrate that is present and that is going to be decay or that is dead, on that body, decaying matter or the dead, any plants dead or animal is dead, the fungi can grow on it and they can take food material from them. They can take the complex food material and changes into the simpler forms. So they decay, they helps to decay those materials. What is important to recognize is that ultimately all the food that is required for life process comes from the photosynthesis. So if you see in the case of this fungi also, they are dependent upon the dead and decaying matter. It means that the fungi that is growing on any dead plants and animals, earlier it was living, right? It was living. Suppose it is a plant. Okay, a plant is like fruits of the plant that has been fallen down and it is present on the floor of the forest, and you see after some days some fungi are growing on that fruit. Okay, so this fruit is having some food material, and that food material has came from the process of photosynthesis. Any dead parts of the plant, whether it is the twigs or whether it is some leaves that has been fallen and that they are going in the process of decay in the presence of fungi. So these fungi are working or taking the food material from those dead plants, and in those dead plants the food material has been came from the process of photosynthesis only. Now let us talk about the animals, those dead animals has been taken the food from the green plants, and green plants has food from the process of photosynthesis. So indirectly you can see that this animal body is having food material that has been synthesized from the process of photosynthesis. Like in our body, most of the food that we eat are coming from the plants, right? So if there is no photosynthesis, then what will happen? We cannot get the food from the plants, right? So what is important to recognize now? This point is very, very important to understand this. What is important to recognize is that ultimately all the food that is respired for life, whether it is respiration is going in the process of plants or animals or fungi, okay? Food that is respired for life process came from photosynthesis only, whether it is coming from the animals or the plants. So this chapter deals with the cellular respiration or the mechanism of breakdown of food material within the cells to release energy. So in this chapter, what we are going to discuss about? We are going to discuss about the cellular respiration. It means that whether it is a plants or animals, how the cellular respiration is taking place, right? And we will also talk about the mechanism of breakdown of food material, how the food materials are broken down within the cell so that they can release the energy. Okay. And the trapping of this energy for the synthesis of ATP, and also the energy that has been released. Okay. The energy that has been released will get trapped and stored in the form of ATP. So ATP will get synthesized. Photosynthesis, of course, takes place within the chloroplast in eukaryotes, whereas the breakdown of the complex molecule to yield energy takes place in the cytoplasm and in the mitochondria, also in the eukaryotes. What does this mean? It means that what is the site of photosynthesis? The site of photosynthesis is the chloroplast. And chloroplast you see in the case of eukaryotic cells, right? So photosynthesis is occurring in the organelle of the cell organelle, that is the chloroplast. Okay. And where this breakdown of this food material is occurring, the breakdown of the food material is occurring in the cytoplasm and also in the mitochondria. So these two places, it is involved for the process of respiration. Whereas the synthesis of food, that is occur in the case of chloroplast. Okay. Now, the breaking of the C-C bond, carbon-carbon bond of a complex compound through oxidation within the cells, leading to release of considerable amount of energy, is called respiration. So this is the definition of respiration. And what does this say? The breaking of the carbon-carbon bonds of the complex compound. So glucose is having, it is a 6 carbon compound, C6H12O6, okay, and it is having the carbon-carbon bond. So when these carbon-carbon bonds are broken down, okay, through the oxidation process, means in the presence of oxygen, this breaking of the carbon-carbon bonds is occurring in the presence of oxygen. So that is why it is the oxidation within the cell. It is written here, oxidation within the cell, means in the presence of oxygen, the carbon-carbon bonds are broken down and leading to release the considerable amount of energy is called respiration. And in this process of respiration, a good amount of energy is released, and that has been stored. That energy is stored in the high energy bond of ATP, phosphate bonds of ATP, right? So this is the process of respiration. Now, the compounds that are oxidized during this process are known as respiratory substrates. Okay. So, the compounds that are broken down, okay, or get oxidized during the process is known as respiratory substrates. And usually, carbohydrates are oxidized to release energy. And this carbohydrates are oxidized to release energy. But the protein, fats, and even the organic acids can be used as the respiratory substrates. Okay. So not only the glucose is used, but also the protein, the fats, and other organic acids are also used as a substrate, okay, in the process of respiration. So they are used as a respiratory substrates in some plants under certain conditions. But basically, carbohydrates are the first option that get oxidized. Okay, that is the respiratory substrate. That is called as the respiratory substrates. Now, during oxidation within a cell, all the energy contained in the respiratory substrate is not released free into the cell. Okay. So in the process of oxidation, what will happen? All the energy that is contained in the respiratory substrate is not released free into the cell or in a single step. I've already told you that whole respiration process is not going to occur in just one single step. It is a series of reaction. Okay. So it is released in a series of slow stepwise reactions controlled by enzymes. So it means that every reaction is occurring or every reaction takes place in the presence of some specific enzymes. So those enzymes are very, very important. If these enzymes are absent or not get synthesized in the plant body, then that respiration steps, that particular steps will not going to be come. Okay. And not the after that the further reactions will not all will also not occur. Okay. And it is trapped as a chemical energy in the form of ATP. So these are the biochemical reactions that are occurring in the presence of some enzymes. Okay. Hence, it is important to understand that the energy released by the oxidation in respiration is not rather cannot be used directly, but it is used to synthesize ATP, right? So it means that the energy that is released by the oxidation of the food material that we call as a cellular respiration is not used directly. That energy is not used directly, but it gets stored or it is get synthesized in the form of ATP. So ATP gets synthesized. It means that energy is stored in the form of high energy bond that is called as ATP. And that is broken down. That energy is broken down whenever the energy is needed to be utilized, whenever it is required. Okay. So that is used. Now, hence ATP act as the energy currency of the cell. This ATP is used as an energy currency of the cell. Now, this energy trapped in ATP is utilized in various energy requiring process of the organism. Okay. So energy that is trapped in the form of ATP. Okay. That is the trapped in the form of ATP is utilized in various energy requiring process of the organisms. And the carbon skeleton produced during the respiration is used as a precursors for the biosynthesis of other molecules in the cells, right? So the energy that is trapped in the ATP is used in the form of whenever that is required. Okay, energy is required, and the carbon skeleton that is produced during the respiration is used as a precursor of biosynthesis of other molecules. Okay, that is used as a substrate for the other molecules. Okay, so do plants breathe? Okay, so well, the answer to this question is not quite so direct. Okay, so yes, plants require oxygen for the respiration to occur, and they also give out carbon dioxide, right? So plants require oxygen, and that is for the process of respiration, and they also give out the carbon dioxide. They give out the carbon dioxide. Hence, plants have system in place that ensure the availability of O2. Okay. So plants, unlike animals, have no specialized organ for the gases exchange, but they have a stomata and the lenticels for this purpose. So we all know that stomata are the small pores that are present on the surface of the leaves that helps in to get the exchange of the help in the gases exchange, that they take up the oxygen from the outer atmosphere, and whatever the carbon dioxide has been synthesized in the process of the respiration is given out to from that pores only. That is the stomata. And also there are lenticels. The lenticels are present on the bark of the trees, on the fruits, outer covering, okay, epicarp. So they are also having the small pores that are called as lenticels. So that is also helping in the process of exchange of gases, right? So in this way, the exchange of gases take place in the case of plants. So there are several reasons why plants can get along without a respiratory organ. First, each plant's part take care of its own gas exchange needs. Okay, every parts of the plant that can get the gaseous exchange needs. There is a very little transport of gases from one plant to the another. Okay, in the case of plants, there is not much transportation of oxygen. Like in the case of animals, we see that we are having the blood, and the blood is one of the component that is called as RBC, that is very useful for transporting the oxygen material. But here in this case, the oxygen is not transported in that way. So there is a very little transport of gases from one plant parts to the another. Basically, the surface. So from the surface also there is some gaseous exchange. From the roots also there is some gaseous exchange. So every part of the plants, okay, they are involved in the gaseous exchange. Second, plants do not present great demand of gaseous exchange. This is also very, very important. Roots, stem, and leaves respire at the rate far lower than animals do. Okay, so the rate of respiration is not as high as we see in the case of animals. So there is not much gaseous exchange as we see that in the case of animals, we are continuously breathing. In that, if you compare with the plants, then the plants are not doing respiration at that extent. Or you can say the gaseous exchange with the animals to that extent, if you compare, right? So the roots and stem leaves respire at rates far lower than animals do. Okay. So only during the photosynthesis are large volume of gases exchanged. Okay, but in the process of photosynthesis, there is a great gaseous exchange takes place. So each leaf is well adapted to take care of its own need during this period. Okay, so a lot of carbon dioxide has been taken because the process of photosynthesis, this carbon dioxide is the raw material. So the raw material should be there in the proper way to to go for the process of photosynthesis. So when cells photosynthesize, availability of O2 is not a problem. Okay, when there is a process of photosynthesis going on in the cells, okay, it is not a problem in these cells since O2 is released within the cells. Okay, O2 is a byproduct in the case of photosynthesis. So O2, to getting the O2 is not a big problem because O2 is released as a bioproduct in the cell itself. Third, the distance that gas must diffuse even in the large, bulky plant is not great. So each living cells in a plant is located quite close to the surface of the plant. Okay, so the surface of the plant, they are having the cells and they can go for the gaseous exchange. So this is true for leaves. You may ask, but what about the thick woody stem and the roots? In stems, the living cells are organized in the thin layer inside the or beneath the bark, and there they are having the lenticels. So the lenticels, in the case of woody stems, the lenticels that are present on the bark, they are helping in the gaseous exchange there. So they are also having the opening called lenticels. Yes, just now I have explained this. The bark of the tree are also having the lenticels on their surface. So the cells in the interior are dead and provide only mechanical support. Okay, so the cells in the interior are the dead and they provide only mechanical support. So thus most of the plants have at least a part of their surface in contact with the air. So the amount of air that is required, air means oxygen that is required, get fulfilled by the stomata and also the lenticels. So there is not much like a requirement of the you can say the gaseous exchange. So whatever the gaseous exchange is occurring with the help of stomata or the you can say the lenticels is sufficient for them. And also for the process, by the process of photosynthesis, there is the release of oxygen. So when there is a requirement of the oxygen, that oxygen can be used for the process of respiration also. So this is also facilitated by the loose packing of the parenchyma cells in leaves, stems and roots. But there also you can see in the leaves also there are some loose parenchyma, and with that the oxygen can move to the inner surfaces also, right? In the leaf, stem and root, which provide interconnected network of the air spaces. So whether it is a root, whether it is a stem or leaves, there are some air cavities and air spaces, you can say that. And through these air spaces, some of the oxygen molecule can diffuse to the inner surfaces, right? And there, whatever the oxygen is required, it get fulfilled in that way. Okay. So let us talk about the oxidation of food, the complete combustion of glucose, which produces carbon dioxide and water as an end product, yields energy, most of which gives out as the heat. So here you can see C6H12O6. What is this? This is a carbohydrate. Okay, glucose. Very simple form of carbohydrate is the glucose, and it uses oxygen. It uses oxygen. You can see these are the two substrates. Okay, or you can say uh, that is required for the process of respiration. Okay, these are the reactants, carbohydrate and oxygen. And what are the products? Carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Now, this energy which has been released here is used to synthesize ATP molecule. So in this energy, it is to be useful to the cell. It should be able to utilize the synthesize other molecule that the cell requires, right? But this respiration process you have just seen in a single step, it is not like that. It is a series of chemical reactions. Okay, so that we will see how these chemical reactions are taking place inside the cells, right? So let us see that. The strategy that plant cell uses is to catabolize the glucose molecule in such a way that not all the liberated energy goes out as heat. Okay, most of the energy that has been liberated here is you can say that goes out in the form of heat. Okay, so the key is to oxidize glucose not in one step but in a several small steps, enabling some steps to be just large enough such that the energy released can be coupled to ATP synthesis. Okay, so what is the key? The key is to oxidize the glucose molecule. The oxidation of glucose molecule is essential. And one step, not in one step. Okay, this respiration process, or you can say the oxidation of glucose molecule, is not occurring in just one single step, but it is a several small steps, enabling some steps to be just large enough such that the energy released can be coupled to ATP synthesis. So at that time only, whatever the energy is released at that time, it gets synthesized in the form or converted in the form of ATP synthesis. So how this is done is essentially the story of respiration. So during the process of respiration, oxygen is utilized. Now from here till here, we have understood that oxygen is a very important, you can say, the requirement for the process of photosynthesis. Okay, oxygen is utilized and carbon dioxide, water and energy are released as a byproduct. So that is released here as a byproduct. And the combustion reaction require oxygen. And you know that whatever get burned, that is the combustion process, that also require oxygen. Without oxygen, the combustion process does not occur. But some cells lives where oxygen may or may not be available. There are so many cells where the oxygen is absent, where the oxygen is not reach there. So can you think such situation, an organism where the O2 is not available, how they are getting the process of respiration, how they are fulfilling that process without the presence of oxygen? So there are sufficient reasons to believe that the first cells on this planet lived in an atmosphere that lacked oxygen. Think about that there is no oxygen. Okay. So even among the present day living organism, we know of several that are adapted to anaerobic condition. Earlier, our planet was not oxidized. Today, the environment is oxidized. But earlier, it was reduced as there was no oxygen present. But that time also, there are some microorganisms that are there and they are adapted to anaerobic conditions. And still today, there are so many, microbes, organisms that are adapted to anaerobic condition. They are living at that environment where the oxygen cannot reach out. So they are living in the anaerobic condition. So an anaerobic condition means they are following the process of anaerobic respiration, means that respiration that do not require any oxygen. So some of these organisms are facultative anaerobes, while in others the requirement of anaerobic condition is obligate. Right? It means that they are going for the anaerobic respiration, but when the oxygen is not available. But when the oxygen is available, they start doing the process of aerobic respiration. Facultative anaerobes. Obligatory anaerobes means they never take oxygen for the process of respiration. Obligate anaerobes. Okay. So two types of anaerobes we are having. In any case, all living organisms retain the enzymatic machinery to partially oxidize glucose without the help of oxygen. So there are so many, the enzymatic reactions are there. There are many chemical reactions that are going on with the help of the enzymes. So the enzyme based reaction, or you can say the enzymatic machinery, and to partially oxidize the glucose without the help of oxygen. So this breakdown of glucose to pyruvic acid is called glycolysis. Still here in this process, glycolysis, there is no requirement of energy, or there is no requirement of oxygen. Okay, so we will see the various steps of the glycolysis process, right? So the term glycolysis has originated from the Greek word glykos for sugar. Glykos means sugar and lysis means splitting. It means that splitting of sugar molecule, right? The scheme of glycolysis was given by the Gustav Embden, an Otto-Marenhoff. Okay, so embedded Marenhoff pathway, it is called as another name for this process, that is the glycolysis. So Paranus, and it is often referred to as the EMP pathway, embedded Marenhoff and Paranus pathway. And in anaerobic respiration, it is the only process in respiration. So whether it is an aerobic, whether it is an anaerobic, this process is common for both the type of respiration. You all know that anaerobic respiration, it means that there is no requirement of oxygen. Aerobic respiration, it means there is a requirement of oxygen. But in aerobic respiration, this part of respiration, that is the glycolysis, there is no requirement of oxygen. And in the case of anaerobic respiration, this is the only step that is going on for the oxidation of glucose, right? This is the only process in respiration in anaerobic respiration. Glycolysis occur in the cytoplasm of the cell, and it is present in all living organisms. So where this glycolysis process is taking place, what is the site? So the glycolysis process is taking place in the cytoplasm. Okay, in the cytoplasm of the cell, and it is present in all living organisms. You can find it in the all living organisms. So in this process, glucose undergoes partial oxidation to form the two molecules of pyruvic acid, right? So in this particular process, glucose undergo partial oxidation. Okay, partial oxidation to form the two molecules of pyruvic acid. Now in plants, this glucose is derived from sugar. Okay, glucose is derived from the sugar, which is the end product of the photosynthesis or from the storage carbohydrate. Sucrose is converted into glucose and fructose by the enzyme invertase, and the two monosaccharides readily enter the glycolytic pathway. So the sugar molecule, which has been also transported in the phloem, and it reaches to the every parts of the body, or you can say the plant body. So the sucrose, first of all, it is converted into glucose and fructose. Okay, in the presence of enzyme invertase, sucrose is broken down in its two component, because sucrose is a disaccharide. Okay, so it is broken down into the glucose and fructose, and these two monosaccharide, they can enter in the process of glycolysis. So glucose and fructose are phosphorylated to give rise to the glucose 6-phosphate by the activity of the enzyme hexokinase. So this is the first step of the glycolysis process. Now in the glycolysis process, what happened? The glucose is converted to glucose phosphate. Glucose 6-phosphate means at the 6th carbon, the phosphate group will get attached. Okay, so that is why it is called as glucose 6-phosphate. Now this phosphorylated from glucose is then isomerizes to produce fructose 6-phosphate. Now glucose 6-phosphate is converted to fructose 6-phosphate, and for this also they require an enzyme that is called as phosphoglucoisomerase. Glucose 6-phosphate is converted to fructose 6-phosphate in the presence of phosphoglucoisomerase, right? Subsequent steps of metabolism of glucose and fructose are the same. So the various steps of glycolysis is depicted in the figure 12.1, and we will see that figure. In glycolysis, a chain of 10 reactions. Now, total number of reaction that is occurring in the glycolysis is 10. So, 10 reaction under the control of 10 different enzymes that take place to produce pyruvate from glucose. And what is the end product? The end product is the pyruvate or pyruvic acid started from the glucose. While studying the steps of glycolysis, please note the steps at which utilization or synthesis of ATP, in this case NADH2, takes place. Okay, so there are many steps in which the ATP energy is utilized, means used, and in many steps the ATP energy is synthesized. So in some step it is used and some step it is synthesized. And also NADH2 reduced coenzyme is also formed. So that is very, very important. We will see when it is used and how it is get converted to ATP. So here you can see the glucose, that is the 6 carbon molecule, and it is converted to glucose 6 phosphate. And for this there is a requirement of ATP energy. So the expense of ATP, it is converted to ADP, and here the enzyme required is hexokinase. Now this glucose 6 phosphate is converted to fructose 6 phosphate in the presence of enzyme phosphoglucoisomerase. Phosphoglucoisomerase, these two enzymes are very, very important. Okay, and now this fructose 6 phosphate, okay, again one ATP is used here and it is converted to fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. Okay, it means that one of the phosphate is attached to the sixth carbon and one is attached to the first carbon of the fructose. And for this there is an enzyme required that is called as phosphofructokinase. Phosphofructokinase. Now this fructose 1,6 bisphosphate, okay, it is converted to triose. It is converted to triose phosphate, that is called as glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. Okay, so here also there is a requirement of enzyme that is called as aldolase. Okay, so triose phosphate isomerase and triose another dihydroxyacetone phosphate. So two triose phosphates are synthesized. One is the glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate, another is the dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Now this dihydroxyacetone phosphate also get converted to glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate. So we can say that we are having the two glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate, right? And now this glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate, here there is a synthesis of NADH2 molecules. Okay, NADH2 molecules, and again two, you can say two molecules of 1,3-bisphosphoglyceric acid is formed because there are two triose phosphates. So two molecules of 1,3-bisphosphoglyceric acid. And here also there is a requirement of enzyme that is called as triose phosphate dehydrogenase. Triose phosphate dehydrogenase. Okay. Now this 1,3-bisphosphoglyceric acid, here you can see there is a synthesis of ATP molecule. Okay, ATP molecule. So you will get 3-phosphoglyceric acid. So from the first carbon, the phosphate group has been released out and it get attached to the ADP to form ATP molecule, right? So 3-phosphoglyceric acid. Basically here two molecules of ATP is synthesized because there are two triose phosphate. So two molecules of ATP are synthesized, right? And for this, there is an enzyme that is called as phosphoglucokinase. Phosphoglucokinase. Now, this 3-phosphoglyceric acid is converted to 2-phosphoglycerate. 2-phosphoglycerate by the enzyme phosphoglyceromutase. Now, the 2-phosphoglyceric acid, okay, release out water molecule in the presence of enolase enzyme and it is formed phosphoenol pyruvate. Phosphoenol pyruvate. Now here again the two molecules of phosphoenol pyruvate get converted to two molecules of pyruvic acid by conversion of, okay, ATP to ATP. So two molecules of ATP again synthesized here in the presence of enzyme pyruvate kinase. Pyruvate kinase. Right? So these are the different steps of reaction. You can say every step is required. There is one specific enzyme. So ATP is utilized at two steps. Okay, two of the steps, the ATP is utilized. First, the conversion of glucose to glucose 6 phosphate, and the second, the conversion of glucose 6 phosphate to fructose 6 phosphate to fructose 1,6 bisphosphate. So total 2 molecules of glucose is required. 2 molecules of ATP is used here. The fructose 1,6 bisphosphate is split into the dihydroxyacetone phosphate and 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, right? The 3 molecules, 2 molecules of this 3-carbon compound. Now, we find that there is one step, that is NADH2 is formed from NAD, and there when the 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde is converted to 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate. 2 redox equivalents are removed in the form of 2 hydrogen atom and from the PGAL phosphoglyceric aldehyde and transferred to the molecules of NAD and forms the NADH2. Phosphoglyceraldehyde is oxidized with the inorganic phosphate to get converted to the BPGA. Okay. The conversion of BPGA to 3-phosphoglyceric acid is also an energy yielding process. Here also the energy is released and it is trapped in the form of ATP. Another ATP is synthesized during the conversion of phosphoenol pyruvate to pyruvic acid at the last step. Okay, and there is a requirement of pyruvate kinase enzyme. So, can you then calculate how many ATP molecules are directly synthesized in this pathway from one glucose molecule? Pyruvic acid is then the key product of the glycolysis. So we can say this, pyruvic acid is the key product of glycolysis, right? This is the end product. And we can say that 2 molecules are used in the process of glycolysis, whereas 4 molecules of ATP is synthesized. 2 molecules of ATP is used and 4 molecules is synthesized. So what will be the net gain? The net gain of this process is the 2 molecules of ATP. So what is the metabolic fate of pyruvate? What will happen to this pyruvate? So this depends upon the cellular need. What is the need of the cells? So there are 3 major ways in which the different cell handle the pyruvic acid produced by the glycolysis, right? So in the 3 form, this pyruvic acid can be used. What are those? So there are lactic acid fermentation. There is a fermentation process and in which the lactic acid is formed. There is alcoholic fermentation, the fermentation process in which alcohol is formed, and there is an aerobic respiration, right? So 3 fate of the pyruvic acid. Fermentation takes place under the anaerobic condition in many prokaryotes and unicellular eukaryotes. So there are so many cells in which the fermentation process takes place, okay, under anaerobic condition in many prokaryotes and unicellular eukaryote. In some of the eukaryotes, you can see that fermentation process is taking place in anaerobic condition. For the complete oxidation of glucose to CO2 and H2O, however, organism adopt the Krebs cycle, which is also called aerobic respiration. Though third process, I have told you that there are 3 fate of this pyruvic acid. It can go for the lactic acid fermentation, it can go for the alcoholic fermentation, and it can go for the aerobic respiration. So this pyruvic acid can enter to the Krebs cycle, that is the aerobic respiration. Further oxidation of the pyruvic acid is taking place in the Krebs cycle, that is occurring inside the mitochondria, and that is the aerobic respiration. So this require O2 supply. Now that is why it is called as aerobic respiration, means for this process to occur, there is a requirement of oxygen. In fermentation, say by yeast is a fungi, right? Unicellular fungi. The incomplete oxidation of glucose is achieved under the anaerobic condition by the set of reactions where the pyruvic acid is converted to CO2 and ethanol. So in the case of yeast, this pyruvic acid, okay, in anaerobic condition is changed to ethanol and carbon dioxide gas is released. The enzymes pyruvic acid, decarboxylase, and alcohol dehydrogenase catalyze these reactions. So these reactions are again occurring in the presence of some enzyme. So other organisms like some bacteria produce lactic acid. Okay, if you see the fermentation process in the case of bacteria, then they produces lactic acid from pyruvic acid. So here you can see glucose, it is converted to glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. It is converted to NAD, NADH, and 3-phosphoglyceric acid. And later on, it is converted to phosphoenol pyruvic acid, and pyruvic acid is formed at the last. So this is whole showing the glycolysis process, right? Now, this is occurring in the yeast cell, fungi. Pyruvic acid is converted to ethanol and carbon dioxide and NADH to by the use of NADH2 molecules. Whereas in the case of bacteria, you can see here the pyruvic acid is converted to lactic acid. Again, the expense is NADH2, right? And in some time, when you do the vigorous exercise also, then also this lactic acid is produced in our body, because there is a frequent requirement of energy. Okay. So every time what is running down? Glycolysis, 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 and there is an accumulation of this pyruvic acid. So pyruvic acid converted to the lactic acid, right? So there is a cramp. So when oxygen is inadequate for the cellular respiration, pyruvic acid is reduced to lactic acid by the lactate dehydrogenase, because at that time the oxygen is not present in much amount, right? So there the cellular respiration undergo the change of pyruvic acid to the lactic acid by the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase. Now the reduction agent NADH2, which is reoxidize NAD in both the process. So NADH2 is used, and in the presence of enzyme lactate dehydrogenase, so pyruvic acid is converted to the lactic acid. Now, in both lactic acid and alcohol formation, not much energy is released. Energy is not released. Less than 7% of the energy is glucose is released, and not all of it's trapped as a high energy in the bond of ATP. So very less amount of energy is released in this conversion, and you can say this, and that is also not trapped in the form of ATP. The energy is released, and this conversion is also not used in the form of ATP. Now, the process are hazardous. Either acid or alcohol is produced. It is not good. So what is the net ATP that is synthesized? Calculate how many ATP are synthesized and deducted the number of ATP utilized during the glycolysis. So this we have already done. And when one molecule of glucose is fermented to alcohol or lactic acid, yeast poison themselves to death when the concentration of alcohol reaches about 13%. So yeast going to die when itself, because they are going for the alcohol production, okay, ethyl alcohol, and they become lethal to themselves when it reaches to the 13%, right? So what then would be the maximum concentration of alcohol in beverages that are naturally fermented? So how do you think the alcohol beverages of the alcohol content greater than this concentrations are obtained? How they are having the more concentration in the beverages? So when what then is process by which the organism can carry out complete oxidation of glucose and extract the energy stored to synthesize a large number of AT molecule, as there is a need of cellular metabolism, right? But we require more energy. We cannot go for this only the small amount of energy that is produced by the process of glycolysis. We required more amount of energy, so there must be the complete oxidation of glucose. It means that there is a reduction, there is a oxidation of this pyruvic acid that should go for the Krebs cycle inside the mitochondria, right? So in eukaryote, these steps take place within the mitochondria, and for this, they require oxygen molecule. Aerobic respiration is the process that leads to complete oxidation of organic substances in the presence of oxygen and release of CO2, water, and a large amount of energy present in this substrate. So when there is a complete oxidation of a food material, then there is a release of large amount of ATP. So this type of respiration is most commonly occur in the higher organism because they are more complex. They require more amount of energy. So we will look at these processes in the next section. Okay. So this is end of this today's session. Thank you very much for attending today's session. We will meet in the next session, and we will see how the Krebs cycle and the electron transport system goes on, and there is a synthesis of large amount of ATP. Okay. So thank you very much for attending the session. Thank you.